2 weeks before wedding, I uncovered a family secret that changed everything. My fiancée, Sarah, 28 female, and I, 34 male, have known each other for about 6 years, engaged for 1. Our wedding is scheduled to take place in just 2 weeks, and I just witnessed something that is making me feel like I am making the biggest mistake in my life. Tonight, Sarah and I were taking a rare opportunity to relax at home. Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner while I was out back working on one of my projects. We live on acreage, and I am building a pagoda fire pit in the backyard that we were planning on using this fall. Anyway, as you do when you're doing heavy labor, I got thirsty and came back to the house to get a drink. I see Sarah at the counter preparing dinner and talking on speakerphone. I recognize the voice instantly as my brother-in-law, Marty. Now this is where my brain gets totally twisted. Marty asks Sarah where her sister Evelyn is, as he's been trying to get in contact with her, and she's not answering texts. I hear Sarah say to him, "She just left here. She should be home in a half hour or so." It should be noted that Evelyn is Marty's wife of 5 years. I have to admit that I didn't immediately register what she had just said. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a glass and asked Sarah, "What was that all about?" She responds with, "Marty was looking for Evie." I see her texting and ask her, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm texting Evie that Marty was looking for her." Anyway, I pour myself a drink, sit down, have a sip, and then finally my brain starts to work. First off, I heard Sarah tell Marty that Evelyn was here. Evelyn was not here, and the last time we saw her was yesterday when she came over to work on some last-minute wedding decoration stuff with Sarah. Secondly, why is she texting Evelyn and expecting a response when I distinctly heard Marty say that Evelyn wasn't answering her texts? Lastly, why the shoot would she tell Marty that Evelyn should be back in 30 minutes unless she either knows where she is? Then why did she lie? Or she is, right now in front of me, texting her to tell her to get her butt home quickly. The only conclusion that I came up with is that Sarah is lying to Marty about the whereabouts of her sister, Marty's wife, and is probably warning Evie that Marty will expect her home in half an hour. I then spent probably the next 5 hours concocting various explanations for this behavior, some decent, some downright horrible, and playing them back in my head. I wanted, really badly, to ask Sarah about this, but at the same time, if what I think is going on, then I doubted I'd get a straight answer. Which brings me to about an hour ago. I woke up around 1 a.m. to use the toilet, and I couldn't resist the urge to check Sarah's phone. We both know each other's pins, so this wasn't a difficult thing to do. Anyway, I grabbed the phone, retreated to the bathroom, and unlocked it. Yup, it was exactly what I was afraid of, and probably what most of you were expecting. Sarah's sister Evelyn has been having an affair for about 6 months with a co-worker, and Sarah has been helping Evelyn cover it up for almost that entire time. There are literally hundreds of texts between them discussing it, discussing the co-worker, discussing intimate stuff, really embarrassing things about my brother-in-law, and probably unkind, just stuff that makes my stomach churn. Here is my soon-to-be wife going along with all of it without batting an eye. I am totally 100% screwed. I cannot marry Sarah. I just cannot do it. I can't think of any reasonable excuse she could offer me about assisting her sister in this affair and victimizing not only Marty, but their 2-year-old daughter as well. On the other hand, myself, my family, Sarah and her family have all sunk an enormous amount of money into a wedding that is supposed to happen in around 2 weeks. There is no way we are getting any of that money back. On top of that, I feel like an absolute fool. How did I not know this woman was like this? And what the shoot am I going to do? I can't marry her. I absolutely cannot. However, I still want to. She's beautiful and fun and kind, and I thought we had a bright future ahead of us. She's never done anything wrong to me, but I just can't see her the same now. It's like a big black stain on an otherwise beautiful picture. I just don't know how the duck I got this so wrong, and I'm absolutely dreading doing what I know I need to do. I feel like I want to vomit or break something. Edit. Guys, you don't need to convince me to not marry Sarah. That's obvious. The wedding is off. I'm just trying to figure out my next steps and work up the nerve to do it. There's an incredible amount of pressure on me from the expectations of everyone, but I'm not going to buckle under it. I just am not relishing having to deal with the fallout, and I'm more than a little angry that I'm in this situation. Edit 2. It's 5 a.m. I have work in 3 hours, and I'm running off a couple of hours of sleep. I'm going to take a shower and head into work a little early to avoid Sarah and Stu on this. Thanks to the supportive people here, and a big raspberry to the individuals who keep saying I should figure out whatever good reason my soon-to-be ex-fiancé had for this garbage. Edit 3. I got into work around 7, no one was in the office, so I decided to start pulling off the Band-Aid and called my brother. He lives in Australia, so he was still up after having just put his kids to bed. It was hard breaking the news to him about this because I know he has laid out a huge amount of money for flights for him and his family to come. But to his credit as an older brother, he didn't mention it one time and just backed me up. He made a great point too. He said, totally paraphrasing, "You work in a job where you have to deal with liars and scammers day in and day out. I don't blame you for wanting to have somewhere to go where this isn't a concern." He was totally right about that, and I get now why I am reacting so strongly to Sarah's participation in this deceit. He also had a great idea. He was going to take his family down to Florida to do some sightseeing and visit the parks. Well, now the kids will be accompanied by their uncle as well. It should be easy since we were going to honeymoon there as well, and we're planning on meeting them for a bit anyway. I'll just rebook everything to be closer to him and his family, and I'll offer Sarah's ticket to either my sister or another family member. I haven't had time to read everyone's comments, but I have answered a few. Right now, I'm just sort of making myself sick by drinking cup after cup of coffee and trying to distract myself until the day gets on enough where I can reach out to Marty. Edit 4. Just did morning stand-up. My stomach is doing flip-flops from drinking about 2 pots of coffee since I got in here so early, and I absolutely cannot focus and concentrate. I feel like I can't do anything really from my side until I tell Marty what I know, so I'm just going to take a sick day and drive over to his house and see if he's around. If not, I'll call him and track him down. Marty is a teacher who is on break right now, and Evelyn works a 9 to 5 like me, so odds are good this works out. Edit 5. Got to Marty's house a little after 10 a.m. He had just put his daughter down for a nap, and we had a long, frankly brutal talk in the kitchen. Basically, he suspected this for a couple of months now, but Evelyn has been very good at covering her tracks, obviously with the assistance of Sarah and a couple of their mutual friends. I, unfortunately, do not have all 6 months of text messages, just a couple of dozen screenshots I sent to myself from Sarah's phone. But I gave him what I have and offered to help him however I could. I am a field analyst in the Special Investigations Unit department of a mid-sized insurer specializing in workers' compensation fraud, so I know a few things and a few people. Anyway, I am now working from my laptop in my almost brother-in-law's kitchen, trying to salvage whatever I can. I'm going to have to talk to Sarah this evening and get the word out as fast as I can to my friends and family, now that I know I won't mess up Marty's situation. So far, I managed to rebook most of the honeymoon, although I had a problem with the ticket because Sarah was flying under her maiden name, and our carrier has a surname rule for name changes. Anyway, they did allow me to cancel and get a partial refund and rebook to my sister, who will be accompanying her 2 brothers and nieces to Florida in a couple of weeks. I'm holding off on canceling the venues until after I talk to Sarah because I don't want to tip anyone off until Marty gets his chance to confront Evelyn. But I will absolutely be letting my family and friends know this afternoon sometime and beg them to keep it close. I'm basically in a frenzy right now, canceling stuff I can cancel, and I'm heading down to the bank in a few to open a new account and get my bills and pay sorted out. The finances, some people have mentioned them, but it should be pretty good. The mortgage is in my name since we were not married, and I have the bigger income, but Sarah did contribute about $20,000 versus my $60,000 towards the down payment. I will have to probably pay her out that money and some portion of the mortgage payments for the last 16 months, but it could be worse. It's about 8:30 p.m. right now, and I'm writing this from my buddy's house. His name is Mark, and he is a former co-worker of mine that is also in the same field of work. As I mentioned in a previous update, I work as a field analyst in the Special Investigations Unit department of a decent-sized insurance carrier. For people who don't know what that is, I'm basically a private detective. My job is to investigate what we think might be fraudulent claims in regards to workers' compensation. Anyway, as I kind of hinted at, Marty asked for my help in finding out who the other guy was that Evelyn was cheating on him with. All we had to go on was a name. Let's call him Jake. The first thing I did was not some major amount of sleuthing. It was basically just going through LinkedIn trying to find the guy through Evelyn's connections, but that brought up nothing, which I thought was strange. Marty had told me that Evelyn was supposed to go out for drinks tonight after work, and that she said she wouldn't be home until around 9 or 10. He didn't have to tell me what he suspected since I pretty much understood right away. I told him that I would help him, but he needed to come with me. I then contacted my buddy Mark, explained the situation to him, and had him agree to meet us later in the day. The first thing we did was drive over to Marty's parents' house so that they could watch their granddaughter. I don't know what Marty told them as I waited in the car. After that, we went to Evelyn's place of work. It's one of those large commercial strip mall-type centers with all of these nondescript offices in a row and a large non-gated car park. We drove around until we found Evelyn's car, and then I had Marty unlock it with the second set of keys. I then gave Marty a voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker to place in the car. Once done with that, we left, parked a bit down the street, and waited for my friend to arrive and for Evelyn to leave the business. Mark shows up about 20 minutes later, hops in the car with us, and around an hour after that, Evelyn comes out of her office with 2 of her girlfriends and a tall, younger-looking man with sandy blonde hair. They are obviously holding hands, and I'm like, darn, Evelyn, you're making it easy for me. I take a couple of pictures from the car and then wait for Evelyn to leave in hers and start tracking her. At first, I thought she might go right to a hotel or something, but she didn't. Instead, she drove to a reasonably nice bar and grill in a nice section of town and parked on the street. I drove by her as she was getting out of her car and entering the establishment, and then found my own parking spot and went over the plan. First, we sent Mark in, since no one knew him. He had basically 2 jobs. First, try to get any compromising pictures he could of Evelyn and Jake, and second, to be my alibi. Marty and I waited in the car for around 20 minutes until I got the first in a series of text messages from Mark. They were pictures of Evelyn and Jake making out in front of their 2 female co-workers. Marty's suspicions were right. They were helping Evelyn hide the affair from him. He was obviously very upset and angry. Evidently, one of the co-workers is married, and as a couple, they are good friends with Marty and Evelyn, both of them having toddlers around the same age. I ask Marty if that's enough for him, but he says he still really wants to know who this guy is. I try to tell him that we can find out later, but he's practically begging me at this point, so I tell him to wait, text Mark that I'm coming in, and then enter the bar myself. The first thing I see is Evelyn and her crew laughing and drinking at one of those tall, round tables near the front window as I enter. I stop for a moment, pretend to be surprised, and then call out to Evelyn, "Evelyn, hi, what are you doing here?" She's obviously shocked to see me, and everyone around her tenses up immediately. Evelyn quickly introduces me as her sister's fiancé and says that we are getting married in 2 weeks. There are a lot of congratulations from everyone. I thank them and then stick out my hand to the blonde guy and introduce myself with my full name, hoping that he'll respond in kind. He does, and I'm a bit taken aback. He's not named Jake. I introduce myself to everyone else and then tell Evelyn that I'm here to meet a coworker. I wave to Mark and then excuse myself. Once I get over to Mark, I tell him the guy's name, and we both whip out our phones and go to work. It doesn't take long for us to find him. He's got social media profiles and a couple of court case judgments against him. Everything sort of falls into place when we find out that Jake is his middle name. At this point, I'm basically just grateful that Evelyn isn't cheating on Marty with 2 different co-workers. Turns out that Jake is 26, married, and has a 1-year-old daughter. This just keeps getting better, worse. Anyway, I text Marty the guy's name, and I decide I want to push my luck and tell him to wait a few more minutes. Basically, I'm playing babysitter here at the bar. I'm totally visible to Evelyn and her crew. I can see out of the corner of my eye that no one is particularly happy about this, and my presence is really ruining the night. This is good. I let this go on for about 10 minutes, and then tell Marty to text Evelyn that he's spending the night at his parents' house with their daughter. It doesn't take long after that until I catch Evelyn taking out her phone, showing it to Jake, and then everyone deciding to pack up. Evelyn comes over to me, says goodnight, and asks me if Sarah and I want to come over for dinner this weekend. I smile and say that sounds like a great idea and wish her and her co-workers a good night. Mark and I wait for them to leave, then pay our bill and hurry back to the waiting Marty. There's a bit of hesitation here because we don't know exactly what Evelyn was going to do. Like I half assumed she might have already booked a hotel room and was heading there, which would have made everything a lot more complicated and limited what I could do. But it turns out that tonight was probably meant to be just drinks at the bar, and it wasn't until Marty decided to spend the night at his parents' that it turned into something more. Evelyn made a beeline for home, and we followed behind her, way out of sight, and parked down the street. It didn't take long after that until another car pulled into Marty's driveway, and we saw Jake get out, go up to the door, knock, and be greeted by Evelyn. They went inside together. Now at this point, it's about 7:30, and I have my own stuff to do tonight, and I think that as a friend, I've done pretty much all I can do for Marty, and he can handle the rest himself. I mean, I feel bad for the guy, definitely, but I don't want to get any more involved in this drama than I already am. And being the wingman for him while he confronts his cheating wife is a bit much for me considering my situation. Marty says it's fine. He'll do the rest of it himself. Guess he's more of a man than you thought, Evelyn. He goes to Evelyn's car, retrieves my gear, and we bid each other goodbye. That was almost 2 hours ago. I did get one text message from Marty saying it was done and he was going to his parents' house, for real this time. But my phone hasn't been blowing up, so I don't know what's been going on with Evelyn, and I've been at Mark's since then. I think that basically concludes my part in Marty's story. If he was smart and listened to my advice, he was recording with his phone when he entered the house. I'll find out later. Anyway, my biggest priority now is to head home and tell Sarah that the wedding is off. She's almost 100% going to take it badly. There's no way she won't. But like I said, I just can't get married to her right now. I don't know what the future holds for us, or if we will be done with each other or not. But definitely, we are not getting married anytime soon. Also, for people who keep saying, "Why didn't you talk to her first? Why didn't you confront her?" I have to say, are you people naive? She stone cold lied in front of me to her brother-in-law, whom she has known for about 10 years and purportedly thinks is a really great husband and father. Maybe you are naive enough to think that someone can lie that coldly to someone they are supposed to care about and then tell you the truth, but I'm not wired that way. Until that moment, I never had cause to ever second-guess Sarah or not trust her, but she was literally untrustworthy in front of my face, and I'm supposed to let it slide or expect her to be honest to me. I guess you don't know what it's like to have your entire view of someone shift in an instant. It's disorienting and, frankly, a bit panic-inducing. I'm actually impressed I kept my head and followed my instincts instead of pressing her right away because it led me to the truth. It would have been ridiculously easy for her to lie to me and then delete those text messages, and if she had done that, then I would never have read the horrible things she said, never seen how she can be so duplicitous and two-faced, and never realized how little I actually knew about her. I'm going home to talk to Sarah. I'll update later to let everyone know what the final verdict is. Don't expect it to be a good one. Edit 6. Well, I had the talk with Sarah last night. It was pretty insane. I'm honestly burnt out and still exhausted, even though I took another sick day and slept in until almost 11:15. Sleep deficit is real. I know everyone is thirsty for updates, but as much as it's therapy for me to write them, I am just absolutely drained, and as you may have noticed, I don't know how to be short. Just call it a character trait from my profession and the endless amount of detail-filled reports I've written. I will give the summary, and I promise to do a proper update later. Long story short, I came home to talk to Sarah about canceling the wedding and found her comforting Evelyn on the couch. I almost turned around and walked out but didn't. Words were exchanged. Tears were had. People got really angry, and the police were called. I collapsed and slept for like 10 hours, and my phone is practically glowing from the heat of a bajillion unread messages and missed calls. If it vibrates anymore, I'm going to take it to Evelyn's office and charge $10 a minute to sit on it. Stuff is really up in the air. I have a lot to do today. My family already knew what was going on by yesterday afternoon, but I need to contact some friends today and get moving on other things. I'm just going to answer a couple of questions and then step away for a few to get stuff done. First, I am not James Bond. I am the guy who follows around the disabled construction worker to his Zumba class or skydiving lesson. I've been doing it for about 5 years, and I'm pretty good at it. Nothing I did went beyond a $50 GPS you can buy from Amazon and a tiny, tiny bit of social engineering. You might be surprised how far social engineering can get you, but whatever. Second, I am off the clock on the mysterious case of Marty and the undesirable character. Whatever Marty does with the info he has, including contacting the other wife, is on him. I'm not interjecting myself into this mess any more than I have. Marty is a good friend, but I have my own little world collapsing right now, and now that I don't have my moral indignation to distract me, it's becoming a bigger burden than I have been letting on. Third, I am not an aspiring screenwriter or novelist. I do, however, write a lot of reports. You have no idea. Most of my life is actually spent hunched over a laptop writing a report or transcribing statements. For every hour I spend doing field work, I probably spend 10 doing paperwork or research. Fourth, you are right that I was wrong to leave Marty to go it alone. I didn't have any fear, not even a smidgen, that Marty would do anything unwise, but I didn't properly take into account the risk to him. That's a personal failing of mine. It's not that I don't care. I just tend to estimate that other people handle things like I do, and hence, Marty was doing something that I would do, so I didn't question it like I should have. I know this is a problem of mine, and I'm working on it, but I am also not in the best place emotionally, so my emotional intelligence was low in the situation. Last, people saying, "You don't know the whole situation. What if Marty was an abuser? Yada, yada, yada." No, buddy, you don't know the whole situation. I do. I read 6 months of text messages. I know why Evelyn did what she did. I know how she feels about Marty. I know how my ex-fiancé played along with this. I'm just not sharing it because it's vile, but I know, and it played a big part in how I have acted in the last day and a half. Trust me, if Sarah had done something, anything other than encouraging and egging on Evelyn, we'd all probably not be here. But she did, so we are. Second update. First off, I left Mark's house pretty late that night. Sarah already knew I was out discussing business with him, although she had no idea that the business was actually her sister's affair. But still, it was getting to an unreasonable hour, mostly because I was trying to muster up the courage to go home and face her. After about 2 or 3 pep talks from Mark, I finally got off my behind and texted Sarah that I was coming home and left in my car. As I said in the last update, I was pretty surprised when I got there. When I walked into the house, Evelyn was crying on the couch with Sarah. I hadn't seen Evelyn's car in the driveway when I came home, so this was probably the last thing I was expecting. I froze for a moment and almost turned around and left. This was not how I had imagined this going down, and I knew that Evelyn's presence was going to make a bad situation a million times worse. Still, I had a timetable that I wanted to stick to. I had friends I needed to notify and wedding preparations to cancel, and the clock was ticking. When I entered the room, both Sarah and Evelyn looked up at me, but they didn't say anything. I just stared back, raising my eyebrows in question. The moment passed and Evelyn went back to crying, Sarah back to comforting her. I let it hang awkwardly in the air for half a minute while I thought. It seemed that Marty hadn't mentioned my assistance in uncovering Evelyn's affair. I decided to play dumb, not for any specific reason other than to see how Sarah would react. I took a seat on a recliner, put down my laptop bag, and took my phone out of my pocket. I pretended to fidget with it and then asked them, "What's going on?" Evelyn just continued to cry, but Sarah looked at me and said, "Marty is divorcing Evie." Well, yes, I figured as much. I decided to push ahead with the obvious question. "What for?" I asked her. Sarah paused, and her face twisted, almost like the look a 5-year-old makes when you tell them to eat their broccoli. Evelyn shot Sarah a look that spoke volumes, and then Sarah finally said, "She cheated on him." This response floored me. It was absolutely not what I was expecting. Sure, the cat was out of the bag, but she could have just as easily played dumb. Maybe I'm being pedantic, but it's part of my job to pay attention to not only what people say, but how they say it. Evelyn wasn't happy about this. She kind of crumpled into the couch and made a strange combination of a sigh and sob. I wanted to press on, but I must have hesitated. Sarah probably interpreted it as shock, and she would have been right, just not in the way she assumed. "Did you know?" I asked Sarah. She nodded, her hand still comforting her sister. "How long?" I pressed. 6 months, she replied easily. I was shocked by how easily she admitted it. Evelyn was shocked too. She smacked her sister's hand away. I leaned back in the recliner and rubbed my face. Time to rip the rest of the Band-Aid off. "We're not getting married," I declared. Both sisters looked like stunned goats. I stood up and repeated myself. "We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who would cover up adultery, especially not for 6 months." Sarah sprang off the couch, disbelief written all over her. But I was serious. "I don't like this, not one bit. I don't like that you took part in this, and I can't marry you with these feelings. It would be a mistake." Tears started immediately from Sarah, along with accusations, appeals to my sense of duty, and lamentations about the financial loss and inconvenience to our friends. I had thought about all of this, but hearing Sarah say it made it different. Then, I probably made a big mistake. "Look, I already canceled the honeymoon. It's not happening," I blurted out. The reaction was immediate. Evelyn, who had been quick to understand things, put 2 and 2 together. She screamed, "You son of a duck!" and lunged at me. I managed to push her away and yelled, "Evelyn, get off me! Sarah, get your sister under control!" Sarah did restrain her. I yelled at Evelyn, "Get out, or I'm calling the police!" Sarah tried to calm us down, saying Evelyn had nowhere to go and that Marty had taken her car keys. I didn't care. I locked myself in my home office and called the police. I told them I had been attacked by my fiance's sister, that I was bleeding from the face, and that my vision was blurry. I even told them I had recorded the entire altercation on my phone. Just as I was finishing up my conversation, Sarah comes knocking on the door. "OP, please come out. We need to talk about this. And please, I love you. Don't do this. We don't need to do this. And even Evelyn is sorry. She wants to apologize." I'm pretty sure that last one was a lie, but Sarah was obviously losing her cool. I didn't answer her, and her attempts to coax me out of the office probably ended when the police arrived at our front door. I could hear Sarah talking to them and decided to come out. The cops were 2 males. One of them looked younger than me, maybe around Sarah's age, and the other one looked older and more annoyed about life in general. I introduced myself, pointed at Evelyn, stating that she attacked me, and offered to show the cops the recording I made. The younger one asked me if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. He asked me again if I wanted to press charges. I said yes again. At this point, both cops looked at each other, and before the young cop could open his mouth again, I said, "Yes, darn it, I want to press charges. I have video evidence and this is going to court, or else I'm going to call up your boss." And I dropped his name. I think they were pretty surprised that I knew his name. Not that we are friends or anything, but given my line of work, I spend plenty of time interfacing with local law enforcement and have met most of the brass or talked to them on the phone a couple of times in the last few years. Honestly, at this point, I was getting pretty heated, and while I understand what these guys were thinking, I don't agree with it at all. Facts are facts. Sure, I might not be bleeding out on the floor, but Evelyn assaulted me in my own home, and I wanted her gone. Thankfully, the situation didn't immediately escalate, and the 2 officers handcuffed Evelyn and put her in the back of the patrol car. She was wailing and crying like some sort of gibbering maniac the entire time. Ra wasn't much better. She just kept saying no, please, no, over and over again. At this point, the younger cop circled back and asked us if everything was okay here. I just told them I was going to bed. He asked Sarah again, and she didn't immediately answer, so he goes, "Is everything okay here, Massachusetts, Am?" It was clear what he was fishing for. At this point, I really disliked this guy, but I bit my lip. Sarah finally realized that the cop was addressing her and just nodded at him. Obviously, the guy is not satisfied with this and starts to ask her again, at which point I interject and say, "If you want to go on a fishing expedition, you might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you." I think at this point, I had pushed my luck with this guy one too many times, but what could I do? I think I was probably about 30 seconds from getting the cuffs slapped on me until his partner came up and basically pulled him away. He was an older man, probably in his late 50s, and probably didn't want to process 2 arrests right at the beginning of his shift, especially when one of them was obviously going to be more trouble than it was worth. I'm pretty sure he talked him out of it, and they left, carrying Evelyn away and hopefully out of my life forever. At this point, I'm thinking about if I want to stay here or not. The fact that my parents live a couple of hours away, combined with the thought of how financially constrained I am going to be in the short term, ruled out either their place or a hotel, so I just decided to sleep in the guest room. Sarah made some futile efforts to get me to engage with her in conversation or to sleep in our bed, but I just told her we'd talk tomorrow and that I was tired and didn't want to be disturbed. Thankfully, she let me be, and I crashed hard. Harder than I had in years, which pretty much brings us up to speed to the last update. Let me tell you this. The next day was by far the weirdest flipping day of my life. To start with, I woke up at 11 a.m. Sarah was still home. She had cleaned the house from top to bottom. I mean, the floors sparkled. The toilets shined. I could lick the linoleum in the bathroom, and it'd probably be minty fresh. She had obviously been busy, but when she saw me, she sort of hovered out of immediate range, not quite engaging, but looking like she wanted to say something. I get it. Last night was traumatic for everyone, and she was probably uncertain. Like, did I just cancel the wedding in the heat of the moment? Was I serious about this? Was I really angry? I took a deep breath and told her we needed to finish talking. She tried to sit next to me on the couch, and I thought about rebuffing her, but I didn't. We were not getting married, but I didn't need to act like I hated her, because truthfully, I didn't. I was disappointed in her, decently disgusted by some of the things I had read in her text exchanges with her sister. But we were both hurting here, and I didn't want to make it any worse or escalate things to a point where life could get any more complicated than it already was. It took some more convincing on my part for Sarah to truly and fully believe the wedding was off. She was not taking it well. Heck, that's an understatement. She was a wreck. I think she was hyperventilating a few times. I was holding it together better, but obviously, not only was this my idea, but I had also had longer to come to terms with it. Finally, she asked the serious question, "What about us?" I know I'm going to get a lot of hate from people for this, who think every infraction in a relationship is grounds for nuking it from orbit. Indeed, one could even say that my calling off the wedding was like dropping a Moab on our 6-year partnership. But truthfully, I didn't have an answer for Sarah in that moment. I just didn't know, and I told her so. I said, I read all those text messages, and it showed me a side of her that I didn't know existed, and that I wasn't certain about her or our relationship anymore. I said I couldn't understand why she would go along with Evelyn putting down Marty and joining in, and even encouraging her to cheat on not only him, but their daughter too. She just kept saying, I know, it was wrong, I know. I asked her for an explanation, but she couldn't provide one. She just said that she got carried away and that she had to choose her sister. I told her that I thought a good sister was someone who kept you on the straight and narrow and didn't give you a free pass to be a jerk. She agreed with me and said that she would do better, but that Evelyn had always been the boss when they were kids, and she was always the follower. I get this. I have an older sibling too, and while I'm a bit more independent, I also spent the last 18 years of my life with him living on the other side of the planet, except for the odd, occasional visit around Thanksgiving or Christmas. But still, maybe I had a leg up on Sarah because my older sibling was a decent guy while Evelyn was a piece of trash. Now here is where I get the second major flipping shock of my life in like 48 hours. Sarah says to me, "It's not fair. It's not fair." "What's not fair?" I ask her. "You were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy girl on Instagram last year and I got over it. I was so hurt, but I got over it. Why can't you get over this? Why? Huh? What? What the heck is she talking about? Who is this bimbo wife Mandy? Like I have no flipping clue." I ask her if she was high or having a psychotic break. Okay, that was mean of me, but I have absolutely not been doing online intimacy or sexting or whatever with anyone, especially not some Instagram girl. I'm protesting pretty loudly at this point, and Sarah is yelling at me through her tears, telling me that she saw the messages last year and that she decided not to confront me because I had stopped it. Evidently, she had been checking my socials from my home computer when I am at work, which should have been really boring because I have only family and a couple of work friends on there. I try to make this case to her, offering to let her log into all my accounts and check for herself, but she's just calling me a liar and a pervert and all sorts of nonsense. She starts throwing stuff at me and things are getting out of hand, so I tell her that if she throws one more thing, I'll have her taken out of this house just like her sister. She swears at me and stomps off to the master bedroom and slams the door. Now at this point, I am so darn confused I barely know what to think. I head into my office, fire up my desktop, and type "bimbo wife Mandy" into Google. Sure enough, there is an Instagram, a Twitter, a Reddit even, and of course an OnlyFans. I click on one of the Instagram links and up comes a post of an extremely busty woman, like clearly pushing the limits of science and technology, and oh, guess where she's from? Australia. Well, everyone, remember all the nice stuff I was saying about my brother? Guess who was staying with us last Christmas all the way from Australia? Guess who I told, "Sure, go ahead and use my office computer to play games if you have jet lag"? As far as I can tell, my brother, after his wife and kids went to sleep, logged into either Insta or OnlyFans or something, and was probably paying money to sexting with this girl. What a great flipping guy. Now I would love to call my brother and not only confirm my suspicions but also give him a darn earful, but it's like 2 or 3 in the morning there, so it's going to have to wait. But I'm crawling the walls here, trying to sort out how I feel about everything. I feel totally let down by everyone. I think to myself, darn, what is this world coming to? For a brief moment, I try to connect the dots between whatever the heck Sarah saw my brother do and what she did with Evelyn. But try as I might, it doesn't really come together. Maybe she's a more tolerant or forgiving person than I am, which is why she didn't confront me when she saw this. But I wish she had. It would have given me an opportunity to directly tell her my whole personal stance on these things and to even show her how I would act. It might have influenced her in a good way later on, or maybe it wouldn't have mattered, I don't know. One thing that I can say, however, is it seems like most of my immediate family relationships are incredibly strained for various reasons. My parents are largely supportive, but that's becoming less so now that the reality of the financial loss is setting in. Yes, the marriage is still off. That was pretty much a certainty from the get-go. Sarah's parents are a bit more upset, and I'm sure they are sticking pins in voodoo dolls crafted in my image right now. Evelyn, for people who are wondering, is no longer in jail. She got Sarah to bail her out, and I even laid into Sarah for that, calling her her sister's underling, which I think actually struck a chord with her because she wrote me like a 20-page letter about how her sister always bossed her around throughout her entire childhood. I've read it twice now, and I wish we had talked about this pretty much any time within the last 6 years. Maybe things would be different. I don't know. Third update. Last time I wrote in, I ended up with me assuming that my brother had used my office computer to chat with Mandy, but it was too late, his time, for me to contact him. I am one of those guys that once a problem is put in front of him, I must be actively working on trying to solve it. This is great for my career choice, but in situations like this, all I was doing was driving myself insane. So, I decided to take a deep breath, leave everything until later, and carry on with what I needed to do. First thing up was attempting to contact every person from my side that I had invited to the wedding that I had not yet informed about its cancellation. As you may recall, I had already informed my parents and had them contact my relatives on the day I made up my mind, but only myself and Sarah have the complete guest list, so I needed to do the rest myself. Out of respect for my friends, I decided to call instead of text, but this might have been a bad idea since every phone call typically resulted in a rather lengthy explanation of why I was canceling the wedding. I know I could have given some other excuse, but I wanted people to know that I wasn't being frivolous or just experiencing something inane like cold feet. It was important, not just for my own reputation, but I think in order to show respect to the people who had agreed to come on that day to support myself and Sarah as a couple. Because of this, it wasn't until late into the evening when I finally managed to contact everyone, which meant it was now morning time in Australia. I knew what I needed to do, but I wanted to make sure that my ducks were all in a row, so I took a breather and made a sandwich in the kitchen. I noticed that Sarah wasn't home. I had no idea when she left, and sat down to eat and think about what to do with my brother's situation. Let's call my brother Carl, for the sake of shortness here. Now, Carl and I have always been pretty close despite him being 13 years older than me. He was this sort of quasi-parental figure in my life because by the time I became capable of having long-term memories, he was already well on his way to becoming an adult. He was always generous with his time, played with his little brother when other teenagers would probably have avoided such an activity like the plague, and generally seemed very mature and wise to me growing up. Suffice it to say, I respected him greatly. The idea that he had been sexting with a girl who wasn't his wife, in my house, was something that I was still coming to grips with, and I needed to decide what to do. Talking to him about it was obvious, but at this point, given how much of a shambles my relationship with Sarah was, I didn't know if I cared about having him confess just for the sake of clearing my name. Was there anything to salvage anyway? I needed to, for my own sake of propriety, at least yell at him about this and convince him to stop. However, I wasn't sure if I was going to rat him out or not to my sister-in-law. Let's call her Karen, all right? Carl and Karen, guys. It all depended on what he told me and if I believed him or not. I finished my meal and logged into Facebook and video called Carl. Now, Carl works mostly from home as a remote office worker since his field is related to IT, and he's almost always available during the day, and today was no exception. It didn't even ring more than once or twice before he answered. We greeted each other, exchanged some pleasantries, and then I just sort of dove into it and asked him if he had been using my computer to intimacy chat with women on the internet when he was visiting me. Carl's face froze, and he leaned over out of the frame of the camera. He was obviously closing his office door. "Yeah, I did. Why?" he said to me. I swore under my breath and explained to Carl how Sarah had thought that his flirting was me, since he used my computer. I explained that I wasn't happy to take the hit for him, and I asked him point blank if Karen knew about this or not. He waffled for a few seconds, stumbling over his words, and then looked a bit sheepish and said that no, Karen didn't know, and he'd prefer if it was kept that way. He went on to explain that their relationship had been pretty rough since their youngest was born 4 years ago, mainly in the bedroom department. Carl had always been a pretty private person, especially when it came to intimate details, or at least he had always been that way when talking to his much younger baby brother. However, this time he just let it all lay out. Things had been bad. He had been tired of getting rejected. Karen was always tired no matter what he did or how much he helped out around the house. Eventually, this led to problems on his side, some sort of performance anxiety on the few occasions where Karen would actually feel up for some bedroom fun, and things just got worse from there. Basically, he said, there's no amount of socks picked up, laundry folded, dishes washed, or time spent minding children that would get me laid. It was just not happening, so I started to spend time in my office at night working. He even did the finger quotes when saying this. Evidently, his working at night turned into a pretty hardcore addiction to OnlyFans sites, which, given the relative privacy he had in his office for legitimate work, spiraled out of control pretty quickly. I asked him if he was still doing it, and he swore up and down that he wasn't. I thought I believed him when he said it. He seemed to be sincere, but I just had this niggling feeling in the back of my skull that something was off. Maybe it was because of all of the deceit I had encountered recently, but I was doubting my own brother, who has really been a stand-up guy to me our entire lives together. I really hated being in this situation. Now, the problem I faced was pretty complex here. First, if I wanted to clear my name, then I would have to get my brother to tell Sarah that it was him all along. However, if he did that, then there was no guarantee that Sarah wouldn't spitefully inform Karen. I personally thought it would be best if Karen knew, but at the same time, I didn't know if I felt comfortable potentially dropping a nuke on my brother's marriage over something he not only said he stopped, but is in this sort of moral gray area for me. I didn't have an answer right away as to what to do, but I did urge him to tell his wife about this and to get into marriage counseling. He said that they actually had been going for the last 6 months, and while it was helpful, what had really helped him was getting a prescription for some generic Viagra. I actually did a spit take at that, neatly spraying my computer screen with water. He told me that they had been trying to make sure they have intimate time at least a couple of times a week, and the Viagra had cured him of his performance anxiety to the point where now they were both looking forward to spending time together after the kids went to bed. The general gist of this was something along the lines of, "Hey, this is actually going in the right direction now. Please don't screw this up for us." I really didn't want to be in this position, not just for the sake of Carl and Karen, but for my 2 nieces as well. And if what Carl was telling me was the truth, I could be tossing a firebomb into a relationship that was starting to mend. It was unpredictable what would happen, so yeah, it may disappoint some people, but at the time I felt that the best option I had was to wait and see. I was, after all, going to meet him in a couple of weeks in the flesh, and once I got him alone in a room and a few drinks into him, I was definitely going to get to the bottom of this. It seemed like the best course of action. Anyway, that night I went to bed early. I didn't see Sarah until the next morning. She looked haggard, like she had a distinct lack of sleep. I asked her where she had been, mostly out of habit. After all, we had been together for almost 6 years. She told me that she had gone down to the courthouse for Evelyn's arraignment to post bail. The courts here close at 1 p.m. on the weekends, which is why she had disappeared soon after I went into my office, and that afterward, she had driven her to her parents' house and spent the night. She made a point of telling me how horrible it was to have to explain to her parents that I had called off the wedding. I asked her if her parents knew the reason why, and she barked, "Of course they do." I tried to remain calm, but by this point in this ordeal, I was losing it. I bit back at her. "Are you going to move back there so that they have both girls at home now?" It was childish and petty, but the fact that she bailed Evelyn out of jail annoyed me to no end. "You don't need to be an ass about this," she said, to which I said, "And you don't need to be Evelyn's ducking underling." I could see Sarah visibly flinch when I said that to her. It obviously had struck a chord, and the corners of her eyes started to tear up, and I cooled my temper. We just sort of stood there, miles apart in the living room of our house, and didn't say anything for a good solid minute or two, until Sarah decided to continue talking. "Our parents are going to be here at 3. I actually face-palmed at this. I was about to go off on her for not consulting me on this, but decided that was just my own ego. After all, I did need to sit down with them and work out the details around the wedding and whatever remaining deposit we had, and I needed to, at least once, face-to-face explain to everyone why it wasn't happening. So fine, let's do this and get it out of the way. I tried to make myself busy, but there isn't much you can do on a Sunday except waste time, and time wasting isn't very enjoyable when you know you are heading into the meat grinder in just a few hours. Still, 3 p.m. came, and so did our parents. We all sat down at the large kitchen table that Sarah had bought just a month after we closed on the house. It was second-hand, from Facebook Marketplace, but she loved it because it was solid oak with a beautiful finish and capable of seating 8, and just as heavy as that sounds. She always wanted to have big dinner parties with our families over, just not like this. The next 3 hours were grueling. No one was happy, nor should they be, I guess. The best support I could get came unsurprisingly from my own parents, but even that was tempered. Essentially along the lines of, well, it's his decision to make, which more or less means, yeah, we think this is crazy too, but we're still backing him. Honestly, that was fine with me. I didn't need my parents to get the stigma by association of canceling the wedding. I was fine with owning that. Eventually, we worked out a decent deal in regards to the wedding. We would try to get back whatever money we could, split it back however it was contributed. Some things like the honeymoon were all paid by me, or the flowers were all paid for by Sarah's parents, and then eat whatever losses there were communally. However, when it came to the subject of the house, Sarah vehemently objected to my idea of paying back her or her parents for the deposit. Basically, she didn't intend to move. Now, as you might imagine, Sarah and I hadn't really talked about the us living together situation in too much detail. The fact that I even brought up settling the house equity seemed to shock her because the implication here is that I expect her to move out of our home. She threw a fit, and I don't blame her. I should have settled our relationship status with her first before trying to negotiate a payment plan with her parents. It really tipped my hand to everyone about how I was feeling about our relationship, and while I think our parents expected it, or at least understood, Sarah was beside herself. She was absolutely not accepting of us breaking up over this, and she made it clear. "I am not moving out of my house and we are not breaking up," she declared. And that's pretty much how my Sunday night ended. After our parents left, Sarah and I tried to talk it out some more, but we kept running in circles around each other, and I had to curb my natural inclination to run her down until we got a resolution. Truthfully, I was pretty darn tired as well, and I just wanted to turn off my brain. Believe it or not, we just ended up sitting on the couch and watching a movie together in silence until it was time to go to sleep. We left it there with a, "We'll talk about it more tomorrow," and retreated to our separate rooms. On Monday, I woke up to a large handwritten letter slid under the door from Sarah. I took a brief look at the first few pages, and decided I would deal with it later and went to work. When I left, Sarah was still in bed. She must have been up late writing that letter. At the office, I rescheduled some meetings and started calling venues and vendors that were on my list. The other ones were being handled by Sarah or her parents. It was a mixed bag of results. The catering people were adamant that I pay most of their fees under the pretense that they had ordered most of the food. I shot back at them over this, like were they expecting me to eat a week-old steak? But my appeal fell on deaf ears. I tried talking to the woman who ran the catering business and explaining what happened, but that seemed to only firm up her resolve to get as much money as possible out of me. Inversely, the DJ that I had hired for the entertainment was incredibly kind and gave us back almost all of the money. It wasn't much, however. Things went on like this, and during the day between making calls and doing work, I read Sarah's letter. Now this is 20 pages of written word, so I'm just going to summarize. The gist of it was that ever since childhood, Sarah has been bullied by Evelyn, and in response, Sarah's way of dealing with this was to essentially go along with whatever Evelyn wants or wants to hear. She went on to say that it had become sort of a general way of operating in her life, that she was just afraid to rock the boat, to cause a problem, or sometimes even to voice an opinion. I reflected on this because truthfully, when I look back at our relationship with a more critical eye, I kind of think that Sarah was a bit too perfect of a girlfriend. What I mean by that is, she never disagreed with me, never picked her plans over mine, or even really advocated too strongly against anything I wanted to do. She went out of her way to make herself appear useful, and all around acted more or less like a yes woman in our relationship. I mean, we had never even so much as had a minor disagreement in 6 years, let alone a full-blown argument until now. It sounds great from a relationship standpoint, until of course it's not. I couldn't shake this feeling that Sarah has this deep-seated insecurity and need to make people happy. You know what they call people-pleasing behavior. When I start looking at it this way, a lot of things make sense to me, and I start to realize that despite being with Sarah for 6 years, I don't actually know her that well. It's like she's put up this image around her which is really just a mirror, a reflection of whatever she thinks people want to see. In the case of our relationship, she's more or less been acting my role of the perfect girlfriend, while never really letting me inside to see who she is as a person. Heck, I can't even say that what I saw in those text messages is the real Sarah, because it's almost certainly just another reflection, this time of Evelyn and all her flaws. This may sound weird, but it's like we are in this unequal relationship. Maybe she loves me for who I am, and how I wear my thoughts on my face and my heart on my sleeve, but maybe I only love her for the mirror she is holding up to my face. I don't know. If this sounds too metaphysical for you, then I'm right there as well. It's like this wisp of an idea that I'm still trying to catch by my fingertips. All I know is that in the last few days, I've probably learned more about Sarah than I had the last 6 years, and the letter she wrote me was the first real view into her childhood that I had glimpsed. That night we talked more about this specifically, about her childhood, about her behavior. The conclusion that we came to is that she needs help. She's a grown woman who is sadly stuck acting like a child, too scared to displease anyone, lest she face her sister's wrath, or her parents' disapproval, or the loss of love from the ones she loves. This is no way to have a relationship, and I can say that I feel much more confident and assured that my decision to call off the wedding was the correct one. In fact, it could not be any more correct. That night, after our talk, I went to bed with much less angst than I had in a few days, so this basically brings me up to our last update, and once again, it's a ducking novel. I won't wait 2-3 days to do another one, otherwise, I will keep falling forever. For people who have been wondering, the entire situation with my brother is more or less resolved, and I'll get to that tomorrow. But the situation with Sarah and I is still up in the air a bit, but there is a semblance of a plan going forward. I promise I'll get to it as soon as I can, but as you can imagine, there is a lot to write, and I can only do what I can do. 4th update. Sorry this update took so long to get around to, but to be blunt, after the chaos that initially started to die down and my state of hypervigilance started to dwindle, I found myself sinking into a deep depressive funk that sapped most of my will to do almost anything. Recounting the mess that is my life became really unappealing. However, the date for the wedding has now come and gone, and I'm on vacation with my siblings and my brother's family, and starting to really feel like most of this is behind me. So anyway, on to the updates. First off, since this is the thing that seems to really bother people, my brother and his wife are doing fine. Like I said in my last post, I urged my brother to tell Karen about his, what do I call this? Sexting? With the Australian OnlyFans girl known as Bimbo Wife Mandy, whom, by the way, is a very lovely person. I sort of hinted in my last update that I had gotten confirmation from Mandy to back up my brother's story, and according to her, the timelines matched up, and not only that, but his OnlyFans account no longer exists. Now, she could be lying to me to protect a customer, but I don't think that's the case, and she seemed like a genuine person. My brother, for his part, did tell his wife what had happened in one of their marriage counseling sessions, and according to him, she took it pretty well and is treating it as water under the bridge. I did pull her aside last week and ask her if she was really okay with this, and she told me, I'll have to paraphrase this a bit. Look, we're not as squeaky clean as you think. Both of us watch adult content, and that's basically what I consider this to be. It's not like he was going to run off and have an affair with her. I asked her if she would feel the same way if he had visited a prostitute. It's legal where they live, and she said no, she wouldn't. But he didn't. So I guess that's their clear line. It's a bit different from mine, and a lot of really, really vocal people online. But if the noises I heard coming from their hotel room last night are any indication, they are doing fine, and their dead bedroom situation is totally resolved. Honestly, these two are borderline taking advantage right now. Since my sister is taking the place of Sarah, they switched rooms with her, and now the kids are with her, and they are both little girls, and love having a sleepover with their auntie. And they have two babysitters who are happy to take the kids while they run off and do goodness knows what. We know what, but let's not talk about it. Overall, I think I did the right thing in giving him the space to make this right on his own, even though people hounded me for it. I will strongly argue that the situation with my brother and the situation with Evelyn were like comparing night and day. I don't agree that cybering someone you know is a professional adult entertainer is anywhere near the same ballpark as actively carrying on an affair, and I don't think my actions and how I dealt with it were anything close to how Sarah did. Like I said previously, she not only hid the affair from Marty, she actively engaged in disparaging conversations about him and said several other things that I won't recount here for various reasons. Suffice it to say, I feel good about this choice on my part, and people who don't agree with me can put their heads in an oven for all I care. Next up, I think, is the wedding itself. There isn't much to say here. Sarah and I and our families lost a lot on it, but that was expected. I forced the caterer who had ordered all that food to either give me back a bigger refund or give me the food, and she chose the latter, which is fair enough. We now have a lot of frozen steak, chicken, and fish. It was delivered to my parents' house, and I think they are passing it out to interested parties. Likewise, some wedding gifts from faraway relatives arrived and are at my house until we can send them back. But overall, the date just came and passed, and for the sake of both of our sanities, Sarah and I spent it at RT. As for the issue with Marty and Evelyn, I don't think this is something that is going to be settled anytime soon. Marty is absolutely divorcing Evelyn, but it's difficult for him, primarily because she's making it difficult by begging him to reconsider. On top of that, school is starting again, and so Marty will be back with his students instead of taking care of their daughter every day. I think that's really hurting him right now, because spending every day with his parents and his kid was really helping him mentally. Also, despite what some people have wished for, Marty hasn't made a big stink about this at Evelyn's work, despite the fact that he probably could get them both fired since it became obvious that they were using work trips to hook up on the company's dime. Nor has he gone and told Jake's wife about the affair either, something I strongly disagree with. When I questioned him about it, all he said is that he's in no big hurry. After all, he has the text messages, the photos from the pub, and the video he took when he entered the house. Basically, he could bury this guy whenever he wants to. I think in some kind of twisted way, easygoing Marty, the Birkenstock-wearing teacher, is enjoying making this guy sweat it out. Either that, or maybe he's enjoying making Evelyn fully realize her place in the world at this point. Just a side piece to a married man. I'm not sure, but Marty has definitely gotten a bit darker over this whole thing. Not that I can blame him. Final update. Everything I know about Evelyn is secondhand from Sarah, but the way I understand it, She is largely just going to work and coming straight back to her parents' house every day, like a teenager on curfew. I don't think they are pleased with either of their daughters right now. But oddly enough, even though the implosion of Sarah's and my wedding was extremely public, I think that it's being drowned out by the constant drama that is Evelyn's impending divorce. Sarah said it almost seemed like they forgot about her once they realized that Marty was seriously taking steps to divorce Evelyn and their concern about having access to their granddaughter. I sort of get that. They are very doting grandparents, and I'm sure their anger at Evelyn is compounded by the fact that their access to their grandchild is going to be essentially cut in half. Now, on to the big event, Sarah and me. First off, I don't think that this update is likely to make anyone happy, not the people who urged me to remove her from my life, nor the people who demand that I treat her with sympathy and compassion for her obviously messed up mental issues. The facts are that aside from the lying and hiding the affair, what shook me the most was probably the way that she carried on with her sister in those text messages. Maybe people would understand me better if I shared them, but I simply refuse to repeat it, and I don't want to get into arguments over their content. Suffice it to say, it was enough for me to reconsider Sarah's complete character, which is largely where I am at today, still considering it. That's not to say that we are still together, definitely not in the way we were as an engaged couple, but we haven't completely closed the door on the relationship either. I've come to understand a bit more about what kind of person Sarah is, and which parts of her are genuine, and which parts are facsimiles constructed in order for her to ingratiate herself to people, her sister included. Basically, it helps to be able to put a name to what is going on with her, this people-pleasing behavior. It helps more to understand how it started, her family, with copious examples retold to me, and it further helps that she is actively seeking help for it. On top of that, even though I found her behavior extremely inappropriate, I give her a lot of credit for how she dealt with the situation when I came home that night to find her and Evelyn on our couch. She didn't lie, she didn't minimize, and she largely took accountability for what she did. Remember, at the time she didn't know that I had seen her text messages with Evelyn, and she definitely could have tried to omit her participation or minimize it in some way, but she didn't. She was truthful to me even when she knew it would make her look bad. That actually counts for a lot in my book, which is why I am looking at simply changing the chapter instead of closing it. To be clear, this isn't a victory for the forgive her and blame everything on the sister crowd, because frankly, I haven't forgiven her, and our situation is very different now. She has moved back into her old room at her parents' house, much like Evelyn, although Sarah will probably be out of there in a couple of weeks because she says the environment is not good for her mental health or getting help with her issues, and I am paying back her equity in the house in fortnightly installments out of my pay until we are all caught up, which will help her defray the costs of getting an apartment on her own. We are definitely not together right now. Sarah really did not want to accept this at first, and I can see her point of view and even be sympathetic to it. But also, if she really has these emotional problems that it appears she does, then I felt that pushing the issue could be the way to light a fire under her to get her to finally seek some real help for them, and just forgiving her would be tantamount to sweeping everything under the rug, which in the long run would spell disaster for our relationship. I really wish that she had opened up to me earlier before all of this hit the fan, because I'd much rather handle the problem as a loving partner and support her more closely, but she didn't really give me the opportunity to do that, which is a shame, so this is the best I can do at this point. So basically my situation is more or less just wait and see on the Sarah front. Maybe one, or both of us, will get tired of this and completely throw in the towel and move on. It could almost certainly be me, but frankly, I've no desire to further complicate my life by being intimate with any other woman right now. So I think if anything we're looking at a period of months down the line here until we get a firm resolution one way or another on this front, and I'm frankly fine with that. Not everything needs to progress at a hyper-emotional breakneck pace, and if I look at my situation, I'm fine. Financially, we're separated, we're not living together, and I'm cautiously cynical about the entire situation. I'm also not kidding myself. If at any point I think that Sarah's issues are too big of a deal, or that I can't see us rebuilding trust with each other, then I will leave. I have no interest in prolonging a situation that I see as hopeless, which I guess says it all. I don't think it's hopeless. It's It's going to be difficult, and I'm open to waiting a bit to see how it plays out, to the point even where I am seeking my own counselor to help me process the events of the last few weeks, as well as looking into how Sarah and I interacted with each other. Because I do actually believe that while I might have been fooled by her, it was partially a willing deception on my part, because who wouldn't love a partner who never disagrees with them, always wants to do what they do, and goes out of her way to make sure you're happy before she is. The thing I am struggling with, and maybe Sarah as well, is how much of that is genuine love she has for me, and how much of it is just a deeply ingrained need to please other people born out of her fear of rejection and anxiety. I guess, barring throwing in the towel, when we reach the bottom of that question, we'll know the answer to Sarah and mine's relationship. I know it's not the update that everyone wanted, but it's all I got.